나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 So, as you may be able to hear, we're having heavy rain in Mississippi right now, this morning. Hopefully you can hear me all right above the din. I apologize. But it's something very important I want to talk about today, and we'll read a little bit of the Diamond Sutra. But I really want to talk about the nature of the mind and what these Perfection of Wisdom sutras are all working so diligently to identify. And it just so happens, and I was dreaming about this in my sleep, and as I chant this morning, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, I hope you're all healthy and safe. This 18th stanza, chapter, whatever it is, it seems like Buddha is really trying to nail it down here. And those of you who are into artificial intelligence, the menace of it, the possibility of it, the sentience of it, this is exactly what I want to identify today. The Buddha says to Subhuti, what do you think? Does the Tathagata possess a physical eye? Subhuti, so he does, Bhagavan. The Tathagata possesses a physical eye. The Buddha says, Subhuti, what do you think? Does the Tathagata possess a divine eye? We'll discuss what that might mean. And Subhuti responds, so he does, Bhagavan. The Tathagata possesses a divine eye. The Buddha says, Subhuti, what do you think? Does the Buddha possess a prajna eye? A wisdom eye? So this becomes less about the eye, the physical eye, and about seeing and what we attach to that process we call seeing, right? That leads us to perception, or our conception of perception in the brain, which then our mind sorts out. So keep that in mind. Remember, I've said many times, the mind is an emergent property. It is not the brain. But the brain is a phenomenal apparatus for the mind. So let's go a little deeper on that. What do you think, Subhuti? Does the Tathagata possess a Dharma eye? So is the eye informed by the raft, by the going toward clarity, Buddhahood? Is the process of eye something that the Buddha is using to inform his Buddha-ness? So he does, Bhagavan. The Tathagata possesses a Dharma eye. He must, right? So what do you think, Subhuti? Does the Tathagata possess a Buddha eye? Okay. In the idea that this is something other than the Dharma eye, the Buddha eye is the manifest clear vision, right? So he's defining the apparatus. So he does, Bhagavan. The Tathagata possesses a Buddha eye. The Buddha, Subhuti, what do you think? as many grains of sands as there are in the great river of the Ganges, does the Tathagata not speak of them as grains of sand? Okay, so he does, Bhagavan. So he does, Sugata. The Tathagata speaks of them as grains of sand. It's just logic, right? The Buddha says, what do you think, Subhuti? If there were as many rivers as all the grains of sand in the great river of the Ganges, and as many worlds as there are grains of sand in all these rivers, would there be many worlds? Again, that's math, right? So there would be, Bhagavan. So there would, Sagata. There would be many worlds. Okay. Now the Buddha says, and as many beings as there might be in those worlds, Subhuti, I would know their myriad streams of thought. And how so? Streams of thought, Subhuti, what the Tathagata speaks of as streams of thought, are no streams. Thus are they called streams of thought. And how so, Subhuti? A past thought cannot be found. A future thought cannot be found. Nor can a present thought be found. So, this is a perfect lead-in to what I want to talk about. Developers, code writers, computational experts, the people who create a word that you now have become quite familiar with in our modern times, algorithms. These are all mechanistic methods of sorting data points. Take, for instance, a piece of software called Adobe Photoshop. I'm sure you've heard of Photoshop. It's a program designed, or GIMP, if you use GIMP, that's a Photoshop kind of emulator, a competitor of Photoshop, albeit not nearly as popular, but Linux people certainly know about it. I use it. These are image manipulation tools. That's how they're marketed. That's how we seem to experience them. But what's under the hood? Data. An image, pending its resolution, its size, color depth, all that stuff. These are all data points. And there are billions of them, depending on the image, right? Defining between 255 states of hues of red, green, blue, or cyan, magenta, I think it's just called yellow, and key, which is usually black, for printing. I don't want to get too into the technology. I think it's enough for you to understand that image, quote unquote, that wonderful wrapper we use, the word image. When we look at our computer monitor, you understand those images are constructed of thousands and thousands of little data points that all say, here, over here, this part of this pixel has this much red, this much green, this much blue. And right next to it is one that has a little bit more green, a little less blue, and the same amount of red. And then the program does something magical, as it averages those two out where they come closest to each other, anti-aliasing. So you don't have what we call pixelation, right? If you have a low resolution image and you zoom into it, you can break apart those little squares of pixels, or portions of pixels. And to the degree that they're foggy where they meet, that's aliasing. That's trying to blend. And these programs are designed so that we have all of these high-level tools so that you and I don't have to go in and say, pixel number 40,391 and a quarter, I want you to change your data point to these data points, and now we'll go to the next one. Yeah, it wouldn't take long before we just give up on editing an image, right? No, we have these wonderful brushes and pads and erasures and global. You know, we can take the whole image and up the brightness or up the contrast. On and on and on and on, right? This is the nature of data. And programmers and algorithms are mathematical coders and manipulators of data. Now, I think that's enough to understand that process. Bottom line is, it is computational. We compute that this needs to be this set of parameters, and we compute its comparison to those around it, and so on and so forth. It's computational. And so there's this mythology about, because we've come to a level of programming now where the amount of the program is so vast that it creates, in effect, its own database of data points within what we give it, an image, a database of data points. And programmers have now said, well, if we could create a massive database of all images ever captured, and we could put a program far more, I mean, Photoshop and GIMP, they're super sophisticated programs, right? Huge amounts of lines of code. Now picture a program that could analyze and manipulate and record all of the data points of every image ever taken. All right, I have to tell you, I can't fathom that. It's too large. And now we're in the zone where Buddhism likes to be, right? In this unfathomable space. And yet we can conceptualize what that means. And we take a program and we say, program, please find the best picture of a woman in her 60s. Now that assumes that of the billions and billions of images in the database, somebody bothered to put a data point in there about the age of the person in the picture. But you know, with enough data points, the computer could compute that, because there's a date stamp and a time stamp on every image. We don't see it. We can, but we don't normally see it. But it's in the data, the metadata. And you know, if it says, if it can research information about the face recognition, the person, it could find their birth date. It could, okay, this is getting into big data now. We're beyond just the images. We have huge data. That's what the governments of the world are assembling, right? Through apps like Facebook and Pinterest and Instagram and so on and so on and so on. Let alone the information we have in government databases for our Social Security, on and on and on and on. Now the data is truly unfathomable, right? So what if given the impossibility of the task, we could create a group of algorithms as a program structure to go analyze all that data and give us the best looking 60-year-old woman, the best photograph of a 60-year-old woman. Well, with all that data, how does the computer qualify best? Do we rely on data points of people who judge pictures? Conceivably, we could write an algorithm that says, compare all the pictures in National Geographic, New York, all these published magazines of photography, and compare images across the entire spectrum on each individual person, some percentage of which show up in these graphical image databases that are obviously at some point the same person, but the Facebook image and the personal photo album stored on the cloud image and the one published in such and such magazine, they're all the same person, but we can compute preference by weighting the professional information as more pleasing, more correct, more better, and weight things that way. That's all computational, can be done. And the computer will spit out at some point, depending on how much data we throw at it, the best photograph, picture, image of women in their 60s, and that will be a very small subset of this massive group of data, right? And what computer people are very fond of saying, not all, is that if you can conceive of how amazing that is, then certainly you can conceive of this computational machine becoming kind of a decision maker, a sentient, understanding, qualified, an intelligence. And I'm telling you that's completely silly. And this is why I don't like the term artificial intelligence, because it's not. It's artificial computation. It's computation, it's emulation, but it's not a decision-making sentient being. And here's what we're talking about in the perfection of wisdom. We know as humans that we are constructed, not unlike a computer, that our brain is an unfathomably amazing computational tool. All we do with computers is try to emulate it. Have I angered the heavens? At any rate. But here's the thing. No matter how great and powerful the computer is, if it can identify of what it has in its data, the most beautiful picture of your mother, you might look at it and agree, yeah, I guess empirically the computer is right. That is the most beautiful picture of my mother. And then that night, tragedy happens. Maybe your mother has a heart attack or stroke. Maybe she dies, maybe she's just critically injured from a stroke. Maybe you go see her at the hospital, cry, my attachments are being challenged. I'm not belittling that, I'm just saying this is a thought experiment. Thought experiment. Try giving that to a computer. And then you go to the computer and you start looking for the best picture of your mother. And it comes up, boom, like I told you before. And you say, no, that's not the best picture of my mother. The best picture of my mother is that terrible, out of focus picture we took when we were traveling through the sequoia forest when I was 7 years old, and I saw those amazing redwood trees, and I was sitting at the bottom with my mom, proud to be sitting next to me, that my dad took the picture of, and we looked so tiny under this massive tree. That's the best picture of my mom. I'll never forget. That's the one I want to print out. I want to put on my wall, make my background. Why? Why is that the best picture of your mother? The computer doesn't agree with you. The computer can't agree with you because the computer doesn't have your mind. So what Shakyamuni is trying to point out to Subhuti is, you have thoughts. You can identify streams of thoughts with your brain. But what you need to ask, Subhuti, is who or what is doing the thinking? We can sit here and we can identify thinking. I'm thinking thoughts right now. We can even, you and I, sit down and try to dissect those thoughts. In other words, think about thinking. How many layers of thinking about thinking can you go until you finally ask yourself, what's doing the thinking? What's initiating the thinking? How is thinking being colored, influencing my thoughts? There's the mind. The mind isn't in the thoughts. The thoughts are data. And the great brain that is supported by this apparatus is also apparatus. It is the conceiving mind that utilizes the apparatus of the skandhas, all the eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, so on and so forth, that experiences. See, the stream of thought is no stream of thought because the stream of thought is part of the apparatus. It is the mind that is being influenced by the apparatus and influencing the apparatus. Man, that's a hard distinction to make because we're so buried in samsara, in thingifying, that we confuse our decisions about data to be the mind. But it isn't. It informs the mind, and the mind informs the decision making. But the mind is something else. And so when we sit in that place of the mind, now we understand what Buddhism is looking at. Not the thingifying, not the evidence. The evidence is all constructed. If you can understand it that way, then you can work on the mind. And the mind can be sucked into the process of computation and live that way, which is all constructed. So that's where suffering comes from. And the mind can also be, and is, for its very instantiation, capable of simply experiencing without influence, without being influenced, and without therefore feeling as though it must influence. The idea of a self, an I, a possession, a mind, That is the primordial influence that we impose on the mind to give it a sense of ownership. See, this is the block. If we can somehow tear down this idea that all of our experiences are identifiable as a data point, me, then we suffer. If we can instead let all of that experience simply go through our mind as experience, we can still be in samsara, but we become unaffected. Our identity doesn't become a data point. It's not computationed. It's not created. It's not conditioned. It's simply witnesses, experiences. Still influenced, if you will, by its own realization of the amazing network of I's and me's and suffering, wanting therefore compassionately to stop that happening. Because here in this unaffected mind, it is so calm, it is so beatific, it is so amazing. But it's not attached. It's the difficult line to cross. And now, as you read the Diamond Sutra and listen to these words, they start to make a more profound sense of logic, right? So, I'll read a little more, and then I'm worried that all this noise is, I don't know, I won't know until I edit this video how difficult it's making it for you to understand me. 19. Subhuti, what do you think? If some noble son or daughter filled the billion worlds of this universe with the 7 jewels and gave them all gifts to Tathagata, the Arhans, the fully enlightened ones, would the body of merit produced as a result by that noble son or daughter be great? Now see, he's out of that mind. He's talking to Subhuti and he's saying, okay, we're in the physical world. All these gifts. Is the value, the merit of these gifts, the value and the merit being given to the Tathagata? Or is it the sentiment, the mind of offering? And that's tricky, because for each individual it's different, isn't it? So to what degree do we measure the merit of doing those things? This is where we need to look. Right? Remember the story of the girl who gives the Buddha a rock. It's not the value of the rock. It's the value of the sentiment, the genuine mind of reverence, not the data points. Buddhism hits this constantly, but it's easy to miss in the words, and certainly in the translations. They don't capture that specific thing, right? Great indeed, Bhagavan. It would be great, Sugata. You're not getting it, Subhuti. The Buddha said, so it would, Subhuti, so it would. The body of merit produced as a result of that noble son or daughter would be immeasurably, infinitely great. And how so? A body of merit, Subhuti, is a body of merit. Is spoken of the Tathagata as no body. It's not the gift, it's the giving. It's the attitude, the intent of the giving. It's not even the giving. Thus it is called a body of merit. Subhuti, if there were a body of merit, the Tathagata would not have spoken of a body of merit as a body of merit. See, this word salad, it's not about the body of merit. It's not about the physicality of merit. 20. Subhuti, what do you think? Can the Tathagata be seen by means of the perfect development of the physical body? He's really nailing this down now. Subhuti replied, no, indeed, Bhagavan. The Tathagata cannot be seen by the means of the perfect development of the physical body. Then why didn't you answer the earlier question correctly? He's still not getting it. And why not? The perfect development of physical body, Bhagavan, the perfect development of the physical body is spoken of by the Tathagata as no development. Thus it is called the perfect development of the physical body. Are you starting to get the circular logic here? The Buddha said, Subhuti, what do you think? Can the Tathagata be seen by means of the possession of attributes? More data points. Subhuti replied, no, indeed, Bhagavan. The Tathagata cannot be seen by means of the possession of attributes. And why not, Bhagavan? What the Bhagavan calls or speaks of as the possession of attributes is spoken of by the Tathagata as no possession of attributes. Thus is it called the possession of attributes. So the possession of attributes named by the Tathagata is samsara, not attitude, intent, mind. The Buddha said, Subhuti, what do you think? Does it occur to the Tathagata, I teach a dharma? No, indeed, Bhagavan, it does not occur to the Tathagata that I teach a dharma. The Buddha said, Subhuti, if someone should claim that the Tathagata teaches a dharma, such a claim would be untrue. Such a view of me, Subhuti, would be a misconception. And how so? In the teaching of a dharma, Subhuti, in the teaching of a dharma, quote unquote, there is no such dharma to be found as the teaching of a dharma. Upon hearing this, the Venerable Subhuti asked the Buddha, Bhagavan, will there be any beings in the future, in the final epoch, in the final period, in the final 500 years of the Dharma ending age, who hear a Dharma such as this and believe it? The Buddha said, neither beings, Subhuti, nor no beings. And how so? Beings, Subhuti, beings, quote unquote, are all spoken of by the Tathagata, Subhuti, as no beings. Thus are they called beings. Okay. There's a subtext here that I want you to pay attention to, and that there's this tremendous inculcated worry, fear in the history of Buddhism with the participants, the practitioners of methods to enlightenment, that these teachings will be lost over time after Shakyamuni passes away. And you can hear the result of that in this dialogue. In the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, you can see the angst in the conversation about the future, which, as Shakyamuni has already discussed far earlier, the day after his extinction, and over time, you and I live in the period of time he identified as a great loss of the teachings. This is why you and I are charged with Bodhisattvas of the Earth, chapter in the Lotus Sutra, as those who have to take charge of a resurgence of these teachings. Do they teach the Dharma? That's a redundant statement. The Dharma is an experience. The teachings point to, prepare the practitioner, prepare your brain to adjust its thinking to the thinker. And in the thinker, adjust further the way of thinking. Buddhism is about the mind. It's about attitude and intent. These are things that aren't programmable. They're only experiential. And this apparatus, this sense machine of collecting data points, this sense machine created for knowledge and remembrance, data, is the facilitating machine for the mind. And the mind, further dissected, is a mind attached to the sensory data apparatus, and the mind observing, detached, with compassionate concern for the mind attached. I understand what I just said. I don't know that I said it in a way that all of you could understand. So I'm going to rely on you to hit me back with questions. I need to know what I'm not communicating effectively here. Hopefully I have. And some of you are going, I think I get it now. But this is something that wouldn't come immediately to mind or discussed by solely reading the Lotus Sutra. It's in there. A lot of assumptions are being made in the Lotus Sutra that you already know this. But if all you've studied is the Lotus Sutra, even Nichiren, who is the Bodhisattva of the Lotus Sutra, doesn't break things down and has an assumed knowledge base that he teaches or instructs from. This is why we study. And maybe you already know all of this. Maybe you're going, you're telling me something I've already realized. Cool. Then you've studied the perfection of wisdom enough. You can go back to studying other things that maybe aren't so clear to you. But this is the benefit of using other sutras, other periods of teaching, because they may hit something fundamental that's been a stumbling block for your full understanding. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. The Lotus Sutra stands atop all of these earlier teachings. This is why it's so amazingly powerful, because it is what Shakyamuni set out to teach in the first place. But we all have different stubborn data points, some of which we don't even know we have. They were inculcated before we were truly conscious. Anyway, it's a conundrum, because the more conscious we get, the more we have predilections and prejudices, right? Things we need to deconstruct. But a lot of times what you deconstruct isn't specifically those things. There's a whole category of things that by changing a certain karma suddenly blows all of that other stuff out of the water. Again, not something computationally easy to do, but the mind can easily clear, right? The 8 consciousnesses surrounded by the 9th, the Buddha consciousness, can clear all of those other 8. Make them simply serve the Buddha mind rather than be obstacles to the Buddha mind. Myoho Renge Kyo is that method. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you. Thank you for listening and tolerating this rain. Maybe one day I'll have the financial fortune to finish this ceiling so I can insulate from the metal building better and you don't have to tolerate this background noise. For now, I'm just happy to be speaking with you and sharing these insights and teachings with you. Chant, keep your practice going, take care of your health, be kind, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.